The parish of Saint-René rested deep within the French countryside, where the trees grew too close and the air tasted of rust and river silt. Travelers rarely came that far. Those who did left quickly, saying the fog had eyes. The villagers lived quietly, bound by prayer and habit. And in the spring of 1824, their prayers brought them Father Anselm. He was a tall man, thin as a reed, wrapped in black wool that never seemed to gather dust. His hair was silver, though he was not yet old, and his eyes were steady, pale as milk. He spoke softly, and when he preached, even the crows outside the church grew still. The people adored him at first. They said he carried holiness the way others carried warmth. But Saint-René was not an easy place for the faithful. The crops were failing, and disease had passed through the parish only a winter before, leaving graves that sank too quickly into the wet earth. The old priest, Father Lemaire, had died during that plague, his grave set oddly close to the church wall, far from the others. It was said that Anselm requested it remain untouched, that he would tend to it personally. Soon his sermons began to change. He spoke of rot in the soul, of purity that could only be found through pain. He told the parishioners that confession was no longer enough, that sin lived in the body, and the body must be purged. At first it was fasting, then sleepless nights, then something else, something the villagers did not name. Those who confessed returned pale, trembling, eyes red as if they'd wept for days. And when Lisette Moreau, a young girl known for her laughter, vanished after being called to the rectory, the village began to whisper. That night, the church bell rang 3 times after midnight. No one pulled its rope, yet Father Anselm's candle burned in his window until dawn. By midsummer, the fields of Saint-René had gone yellow, as if the earth itself refused to feed those who remained. Smoke no longer rose from most chimneys, and the laughter of children, once heard along the dirt paths, had been replaced by the slow toll of the church bell, always in 3s. Father Anselm said it was a ritual of cleansing, a rhythm to drive out evil. The villagers repeated his words like prayer, though few dared to meet his eyes any more. He no longer walked among them as priests do. Instead, he moved through the village after sunset, a lantern in one hand and his missal pressed to his chest. The sound of his boots upon the stones carried far in the fog, and those who heard it often extinguished their candles, praying he would pass their door. Because when Father Anselm knocked, he did not ask, he chose. Those chosen were said to be impure. They were taken to the rectory, a squat building attached to the church by a narrow passageway of stone. None returned by morning. Sometimes their families received letters written in the father's careful script, absolutions, he called them, sealed with wax, and always ending with the same phrase, "She is made clean in his sight." The baker, the smith's wife, the orphan boy who sang hymns too loud, all vanished one by one. And yet the father preached peace. He said the Lord had revealed to him a deeper truth, that salvation required suffering of the flesh. One evening, during a storm that split the sky in 2, a farmer named Henri Delacour gathered the courage to approach the church. He swore later, before disappearing himself, that he saw light through the cracks of the floorboards. A faint glow, shifting, like the pulse of buried coals. He crept closer, and through the hollow near the altar he heard voices, dozens of them, whispering, sobbing, chanting words he could not understand. When he told his wife what he'd seen, she begged him to leave, to flee before the next sermon. But the next morning, only his boots were found on the steps of the church, soaked in rainwater and ash. From that night onward, the bell rang not 3 times, but 7, each peal slower than the last, as though mourning something the living could no longer name. And through it all, Father Anselm smiled, thinly, patiently, as though the suffering around him was not horror, but proof that his work was almost done. Winter came early to Saint-René that year, a cruel, bone-deep cold that silenced even the river. The roads were buried in frost, the trees skeletal and still. Only the church stood alive, its windows flickering with candlelight, though no one had entered for weeks. Those few who remained in the village said Father Anselm was still within, tending to his flock. No one dared to find out what that meant. One night, the last storm of the season rolled down from the hills, turning the fog into a black sea. From somewhere beneath the thunder, the bells began again. 7 tolls, then silence. Then a low moan, like wind caught in a hollow place. The villagers barred their doors, whispering prayers they barely remembered. It was old Widow Claire who broke the silence. Her son, Etienne, had been one of the first to vanish, taken by the priest for purification. Grief had eaten what little fear she had left. She walked through the storm to the church, her lantern shivering against the wind. The doors, though warped by age, stood unlocked. Inside, the air was heavy and damp. It smelled of iron and something older. The altar was bare. The candles burned low, their wax melted into the shape of reaching fingers. The confessional stood open, and beyond it a faint draught whispered from beneath the floor. That was when she saw it, the hatch half hidden by the carpet, just as the farmer had said. The light below it flickered like a dying heart. She descended the narrow steps, clutching her rosary, whispering her son's name with each breath. The chamber beneath was vast, carved from the earth, lined with crude crosses. There were bodies there, laid in rows, each wrapped in linen, each with a candle burning at its head. Some faces were visible, some she recognized. And there, kneeling before them, was Father Anselm. His robes were stained with wax and blood, his hands clasped, trembling. His voice was little more than breath. "They are clean now, Claire. Every sin scoured, every soul redeemed." When she stepped closer, she saw his eyes, glassy, fever-bright, fixed on a stone basin at his feet. It was filled not with holy water, but with something dark, viscous, still warm. He dipped his fingers into it and made the sign of the cross. They say she screamed. Others claim she simply fell to her knees, her lantern crashing beside her, the flame catching the linen. By dawn, the church was nothing but smoke and ruin. No one ever found Father Anselm's body. But in the thaw of spring, when the fog rolled low again, travelers swore they heard church bells deep beneath the soil, faint, rhythmic, ringing 3 times. For the souls that never left Saint Rene,